With the new changes to YouTube's terms of service, a lot of content creators are going to feel the effects of it. We have YouTube to thank for this happening with their blatantly and knowingly collecting personal information and data from children under the age of 13 in violation of the Child Online Protection and Privacy Act. The thing is, I don't think they intended to get caught, but the fact that they did created an opportunity at a convenient time to make changes to the terms of service, which includes compliance with COPPA. We are officially in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election with less than a year to go now. The Democrats, deep state, legacy media, and the left in general are in a panic. Since losing in 2016, nothing they have tried has really been working in trying to reverse their loss. Their lies, bullshit, and propaganda is increasingly falling on deaf ears. Their use of impeachment as a political tool is failing. They are not winning over the people they need beyond the true believers and Kool-Aid drinkers with the things they are doing. If anything, they are turning these people off from the Democrats with it all. See, at one time, the legacy media and politicians had created an environment where they could just say something was true, repeat it over and over, sell it to the people, and get away with it in the end. They were the gatekeepers of information. They controlled its flow, or lack thereof, and there was nothing we, the unwashed masses, could do about it. Then the internet came along, flipped the script, and changed all of that. They were not prepared for that happening, to say the least. The political, bureaucratic, and legacy media elites thought they were always going to be the ones in control of things because they controlled the flow of information. They thought nothing was going to change that, even though the inevitability of it happening was staring them right in the face with the internet. Now they are scrambling after the fact to put the genie back in the bottle, and I believe that YouTube's COPPA settlement and resulting changes are part of their attempting to do so. Which of course is just my opinion. But hear me out on this. If you look at the settlement itself, YouTube and by extension Alphabet got off easy. The amount of the fine wasn't even a slap on the wrist. It was approximately 2 days of profit for the tech giant. On top of this, they somehow managed to pass the buck, so to speak, with COPPA onto the content creators from this point forward. Which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. YouTube were the ones violating the Child Online Protection and Privacy Act, not content creators like myself. We do not have the ability to collect data on those viewing our videos, never mind use it to target them with advertising or for some other nefarious purpose. If our channels are monetized, we have no real control over the advertisers or commercials being served on them for that matter. That is all under the control of YouTube and in their hands. We should not have to share in any of the responsibility or culpability of their actions just because we received ad revenue. Yet that is exactly what is happening from this point forward. We are now being forced to take on responsibility for both while YouTube gets a free pass and to blame us for their illegal collection of data if they try to do it again and get caught. To get a get-out-of-jail-free card like that, along with the fine they did, YouTube had to pay a price for both, I'm sure. From the looks of things, it was their letting the government in the door and serving up their content creators to it. With that, I mean the deep state elements within it, not the government as a whole. Because if you don't think the Federal Trade Commission isn't rife with deep state bureaucrats, you are sorely mistaken. The deep state is an element of the government that is spread throughout it like a cancer. Every single agency has them festering within them. Obviously, with some it's worse than others. But we have witnessed the rearing of their ugly little heads out of the cracks and crevices of different agencies like cockroaches working towards trying to remove Trump from office and prevent his re-election. YouTube and social media in general played a big part in his winning in 2016, and they will play one in 2020 as well. Which is one of the major reasons why I think this happened. But this goes well beyond the whole orange man bad, Trump derangement syndrome that they are suffering from. He is just the personification of the establishment's loss of control over the flow of information and through it us as a result. Think about it. From the tail end of the millennial generation on, people have or will have grown up with the internet as part of their lives. Look at the havoc it has wreaked for the globalists along with their neocon and rhino lackeys. Look at what it has done on this note in regards to the left with the legacy media, the Democrats, academia and public education, and in the other arenas they have traditionally controlled. From their standpoint, the internet was intended to be a distraction for all of us while they went about their business. They did not foresee it would lead to our breaking free from their programming. They had no clue that if something like that happened, we would take control of it and use it against them. They did not think it could be weaponized against them like it has been. They saw the internet as a place where we would watch cat videos, talk about our favorite sports teams, share way too much of our personal lives with each other, and other benign things like that. This is one major reason why, up until the last few years, it has been seen as a place that should have as little regulation as possible imposed on it. As part of this, the internet was a place where free speech was believed should be protected in large part because what was being said and shared wasn't inconvenient for the left and globalists. Now those days are over. The reason why they are is because of our weaponizing the internet and turning it against them. Brexit was the internet being weaponized and used against the globalists and left. The same with the support online that led to the election of Donald Trump. The conservatives winning control in Italy is another example of it. There are also other lower profile and smaller scale examples where the internet has been weaponized and used like this as well. Pretty much everywhere the left has tried to insert itself and its cultural Marxist ideology into things, communities on the internet have used it as a weapon to fight against their doing so. Some with great effect too, others not so much. It has happened with video games, comics, movies, television, and every other part of culture they have forced themselves into. The left knows that politics is downstream of culture and they are trying to exploit that it is. The problem is, with their doing this, in this day and age, people tend to pay more attention to those things than they do things like current events and politics. The fact that they do has been a major factor to their being oblivious to a lot of what's going on around them, especially in regards to things like politics. Once the left started encroaching on those things, it started waking more and more people up to what was actually going on. Because witnessing someone destroy what you love will do that to you. Which is why we have so many people now who used to make their content exclusively on things like video games, comics, movies, television shows, and the like, also making it on politics, culture, and society today. The left created that monster, and now they are trying to deal with the consequences of their hijacking culture to push their agendas and ideological beliefs, setting it loose on the world, destroying their bullshit and lies. That is what these terms of service changes from YouTube are an attempt to do, and the FTC's COPPA guidelines are part of it. YouTube are not the ones who wrote the guidelines, even though they look like something they would create with how intentionally vague they are. That is YouTube's standard operating procedure after all, but they were drafted by some bureaucrat at the FTC. Under the new COPPA guidelines, the FTC can classify just about any type of content as kid-friendly or targeting children with only a few exceptions. Even then, those exceptions could still be targeted if they do not care how blatant things are as to their true motives behind their doing it. Don't take my word on this. Let's go through the guidelines and keep in mind as we do the FTC wrote them, as in the federal government of the United States did, not YouTube, and this should alarm you with how vague they are. According to the FTC's guidelines on COPPA, a video is child-directed if children are the primary audience based on factors described below. Children are not the primary audience, but the video is still directed to children based on the factors below. Right here at the beginning of these guidelines, they are telling you it does not matter who your intended audience is. That is up to the FTC to determine that based on their interpretation of them, which conveniently these guidelines happen to be vague, arbitrary, and encompassing. They are intentionally written that way too, and if you ask me, it has absolutely nothing to do with protecting the children. In the next section, they actually get into the guidelines themselves. We are going to take a look at them one by one too. Here's the intro to them and the first one. When deciding whether or not your channel or video is made for kids, you should consider various factors including subject matter of the video, e.g. educational content for preschoolers. Deciding if the subject matter of a video is targeted at children can be subjective. Yes, there is an example given of educational content for preschoolers here, but that one is a no-brainer. What about with videos on video games, comic books, movies and television shows, or cartoons? Are their subject matter targeting children even though the intended audience is adults? How is that ultimately decided by the FTC? These are all questions that need to be asked, along with many others in regards to these guidelines and enforcement of COPPA against content creators. Video games and comic books, even though they are seen as mediums that are marketed towards children, adults are the primary consumers of them, which the marketing actually shows this. Is that reality going to win out, or is the perception of both being for kids going to when it comes to the FTC deciding if a content creator violated COPPA? I highly doubt it will be, especially when they are using the Child Online Protection and Privacy Act to target people for wrongthink in an attempt to silence them. They will completely ignore those facts. I am sure of it too. If you make videos on video games or comics and don't subscribe to the left's ideological and political beliefs and call both out, it will not matter that adults are the primary consumers. They will say the subject matter of your videos is targeting children. If you make videos on cartoons or anime, even the ones that are clearly created for and marketed to adults, I am sure this will be no different for you. It will not matter if they are the primary audience of the animation or your video that is discussing it. It will not matter to them. They will use the perception that cartoons are for kids to use COPPA to go after you for wrongthink. The same with movies and television shows as well. They will do this because these FTC guidelines are specifically written so that they can use things like their opinion and perceptions to justify their doing so. The next guideline only backs this up. It is just as vague, arbitrary, and encompassing as the first. Just as subjective, too. Let's look at it. Whether children are your intended or actual audience for the video. In the end, who will ultimately decide whether or not children are your intended or actual audience for any given video? Will it be you? Of course not. It will be unelected bureaucrats at the Federal Trade Commission deciding that for you. You will not be able to use things like your analytics to counter their claims levied against you either if they try to say children are your actual or intended audience. YouTube makes that clear in the note under these bulleted guidelines. Note: YouTube Analytics is not designed to help determine if your content is child-directed. You should use the factors outlined by the FTC above to set your audience. First off, how the hell is having the actual analytical data that shows the demographic makeup of your audience not a tool in determining who your actual audience is, or as a means to show that you are not directing your content at children for that matter, when it can easily be used to do just that with both? YouTube used the same exact analytical data, plus additional data we do not have access to target children with advertising. If it was good enough and accurate enough for them to use it to do that, and for the FTC to use it to go after YouTube, it should be good enough to prove that content creators are innocent of violating COPPA. Yet, we are being told it isn't. To me, that sounds like YouTube and the Federal Trade Commission are conspiring to make it so content creators have their hands tied behind their backs in trying to disprove any claims made by the FTC of their violating COPPA. There is no other reason why YouTube would put that note with the guidelines except for that purpose. At least that's my opinion on the matter. The next guideline is no different than the last. It is just as subjective, not to mention vague, arbitrary, and encompassing too. See for yourselves. Whether the video includes child actors or models. How is this going to be applied? Say a content creator is at a public place and captures a child in some footage. Is that going to run afoul of this guideline? What about if they review a movie or a TV show and there is a kid in a scene they put in the video? Will that? These are just two examples of questions that need answers, and there are many more with this guideline. To give you an example, the guy who runs EEV blog produces videos on electronics, and in a few videos his son has been in them. With these guidelines in place, if he were to do that after they are they going to be able to go after him for it because his son was in the video and involved in one of his projects? With how these rules are written, there is nothing in place to stop that from happening. If someone at the FTC gets a bug up their ass with him, they can decide to make his life a living hell, and the burden of proof is on him to counter their allegations and the punishment inflicted because of them. These guidelines, by design, are written as they are so that there are gray areas like this so that anyone who pisses off the wrong person can be taken down by the FTC if they are a content creator on YouTube. This is consistent throughout these guidelines. The next one is no different. Just look at it. Whether the video includes characters, celebrities, or toys that appeal to children, including animated characters or cartoon figures. I think this guideline is making it pretty clear that if you are a content creator that talks about things like Star Wars, comic books and the television and cinematic universes built off of them, anime or cartoons, celebrities that might have some appeal to kids, or the toys we grew up with, you could run afoul of COPPA if someone at the FTC has decided you have. Star Wars and its characters could be considered to appeal to children. So could the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though most of the movies are rated PG-13. Any of the toys from our childhoods that are no longer in production, because they are toys, videos on them meant to cash in on the nostalgia of adults could be targeted with a guideline like this one. Tell me with how it is written, they could not use it in this manner. The next guideline on the list is one that could easily be used against you if you like to dumb things down for people in order to make complex concepts easier for them to understand. Take a look. Whether the language of the video is intended for children to understand. What constitutes language intended for children to understand? Who gets to decide the intent of someone's language to make that decision? These two things are something to consider. Language that is intended for children can be subjective, and the fact the FTC is deciding that is a scary proposition. What if someone dumbs something complex down in regards to history or science so that the layman can understand it and the underlying concepts of it? Is there doing something like that going to be seen as language that is intended for children because of how they simplified things in order to reach the largest audience? I have a feeling if they're doing it, they are also putting forth wrongthink, and this will be used to go after them with COPPA. It just makes sense with how these guidelines are set up. Moving on to the next guideline does not change that it is the intent of the FTC to use COPPA against content creators to try to silence them. It just reinforces that is the intent minus the one thing in it tacked on at the very end to try to hide that it is. Look at what they define as activities that appeal to children in it. Whether the video includes activities that appeal to children, such as play acting, simple songs or games, or early education. A lot of content creators, as part of their shtick, use play acting for comedic purposes. The same with simple songs and games for that matter. None of their content is aimed at children or designed to appeal to them, but it includes those things. If you do some play acting making fun of Ocasio-Crazy Eyes Cortez or say Elizabeth Warren, are they going to go after you for it even though the sarcasm and comedic element of it shows you weren't trying to appeal to children? What about if you make a simple song to make fun of them? Are you going to get hit by them for that? The only thing here that even addresses something appealing to children is early education. Conveniently, the one and only no-brainer to be addressed on whether or not your content is being made for kids in these regulations. One type of content that does not have any questions about it being made for them. Go figure on that one. The next guideline, just like the rest of them, is up to the interpretation of a bureaucrat at the FTC, and I am sure they will find a way to abuse that it is. Here, take a look at it. Whether the video includes songs, stories, or poems for children. Who gets to decide what songs, stories, or poems are for children? Some songs, like Wheels on the Bus for example, that is pretty easy to figure out. But there are going to be a lot that aren't for children that will get content creators nailed under COPPA. Then there is the whole concept of someone out of sarcasm and humor telling a story like one would to children to consider. Not to mention doing something like that, dumbing it down has to be a consideration as well. Things like that will not be considered though. Because as far as I see it, the FTC going after content creators instead of YouTube is all about silencing the average people with the run-up to the 2020 election. The timing of all this reeks of that. Which takes us to the last of these guidelines, and it is a joke. Just one that is not funny. There is a good reason for that too. I already brought it up towards the beginning when talking about whether children are the intended or actual audience. Here, you'll see what I mean. Any other information you may have to help determine your video's audience, like empirical evidence of the video's audience. The only empirical evidence a content creator has at their disposal to determine the audience of their content is their analytics. The very same analytics that YouTube used as empirical evidence to sell advertising on the platform targeting children and was used to get them into trouble. The same analytical data they are claiming is not designed for determining things like demographic makeup of your audience when it does just that. With YouTube saying that, what is the point of this last guideline? It is almost as if they put it in at the end to be there to rub salt into the wounds resulting from their anally raping content creators with these guidelines. It is as if they are saying that if you have any analytical data that proves us wrong, show it to us. It just can't be the analytical data from YouTube that we use to go after them for COPPA violations though. Because for you it isn't good enough proof to clear yourself from our charges. The reason why it seems like they are saying that is because they are. The whole point of the FTC getting into the mix is so that the deep state within it can use COPPA to go after content creators for wrongthink. These guidelines were created by them and are far more vague than anything YouTube or any other Silicon Valley company has called a terms of service agreement. And they rate those intentionally vague to make the removal of people barely an inconvenience for themselves. Do you honestly think the FTC isn't doing the same thing here? I believe that they are. It is clear that the intent is to make it so COPPA can be used as a political weapon against those the left, Democrats, deep state, and legacy media fear the most. The average people making content online who are against their ideological beliefs and counter the lies and propaganda put out by them. That is the only explanation for the situation for content creators on YouTube with the FTC and COPPA. It makes for good propaganda too. Anyone they use COPPA against can be labeled as someone who tried to exploit children or did exploit them. That label will play on people's emotions, and that is exactly what they want to happen. Someone who has been labeled like that is less likely to have people looking into the facts of the situation involving them. A lot are just going to go on the emotions of hearing that someone was trying to or did exploit children, which makes things a lot easier with taking someone down online. This is the future of YouTube from this point forward. The only way to escape it is to leave YouTube and move on to other alternatives to it, such as BitChute for example. Which for some reason a lot of content creators do not want to do this. It is to the point with them they are pulling excuse after excuse out of their asses as to why they cannot transition to them. Which of course they try to treat as facts and are solely based on their feelings, fears, and inadequacies. One of the excuses they tend to give is based completely on circular logic. This is one almost all of them give too, including those making mainstream content. They claim that they cannot make the transition to sites like BitChute because they only attract certain groups and do not have mass appeal. The irony of this claim being that the whole reason why the masses aren't going to these sites is because they do not have the content that would attract them, which is the whole circular logic of it. None of them even want to do the simplest things to try to save their own asses, and they deserve what they get. All they would have to do is create a BitChute account and set it up to pull their content from their YouTube channel in order to change that lack of mass appeal content there. One little thing that would take them easily less than 10 minutes out of their lives to do. Yet none of them want to do it and would rather be on YouTube making videos, whining about their problems because of COPPA and YouTube censoring them. Maybe at some point after content creators are being hit with COPPA violations, they will get a clue and take a little bit of time out of their lives from whining about that to have BitChute pulling their content onto the site for them. Even then, I don't see that happening because most of them are not willing to stand up for themselves and make changes necessary for their survival at creating content online. They just want to be left alone and allowed to make it and do not realize those days are long over on YouTube. In the direction YouTube is going, it could go the way of MySpace and be surpassed by another platform. The only thing that prevented competition for YouTube was the infrastructure necessary in order to compete with it. Technologies like BitTorrent have changed this and allowed for BitChute to enter the market and try to compete with them. They just need content creators across the different genres of YouTube to start mirroring and uploading their content in order to attract a wider audience there. Those who went to BitChute looking for news, along with political and social commentary, they did so because YouTube went after it on its platform. A lot of creators transitioned there, or started mirroring their content at least, and it attracted that audience. How would it be different with any other genre of content? People go where the content is. It really is that simple. As more people transitioned from MySpace to Facebook, others followed. Every Silicon Valley platform owes its existence to the fact that as more people adopted them or transitioned to them, others followed, which led to the shrinking of competition or removal of it altogether. YouTube didn't just pop up and create a market that it dominated. There were multiple sites out there like it in the early days. How YouTube became the dominant one for hosting video content is by offering content creators ad revenue. That was the only thing they could offer that others couldn't. It shifted the market too. Their ad revenue attracted content creators. Their content in turn attracted the viewer base YouTube has, which is simple 1 + 1 = 2 math. You take content creators, offer them money, and that in turn leads to people coming there to view it. But then one day YouTube decided that isn't how math works, because they do not see that they still need the content creators to keep those viewers on the site. YouTube thinks they can shit all over us and then sell us out to the FTC, and we will just sit here and take it because they believe they have all of the power and control in this situation when they don't. The control and power is all just an illusion that both they and the content creators have bought into. It is the content creators who have it all. If enough content creators on YouTube with large subscriber bases were to move to a competing site such as BitChute, it would be all over for them. They would end up the way of MySpace. To be safe, say 20% of a content creator's audience makes the initial switch to another site after they're moving there. If they have 1 million subscribers, that's 200,000 people who just transitioned there with them. Another creator with a similar subscriber base does it, there's another 200,000. Then another, and so on. Creators large and small do this, and eventually YouTube is hemorrhaging users. It is death by 1,000 cuts. That is exactly what happened to YouTube's competition in the early days and MySpace with Facebook. Content creators just have to start embracing another site and it will happen. Right now, BitChute is the only site that can compete with YouTube. Is it perfect? No. But neither was YouTube in its early days, or for years after it rose to dominance for that matter. Give it time. They are currently in the process of getting streaming up and running there as well. Once they do, when it comes down to the basics, they will be offering the same thing that YouTube is with far less overhead and at a fraction of the cost. That is game-changing for the industry. But the biggest thing BitChute has going for it is, it's a free speech platform, which with how YouTube is using ad revenue and monetization of content and channels to try to force people to self-censor or seek other sources of income, preferably not making videos, you'd think that would be a good reason for them to make the switch, or at least expand their presence there. Most of them are already having to rely on contributions from their subscribers through PayPal and sites like Patreon and Subscribestar to support their making content. Not to mention through cryptocurrency and other ways as well. So at this point, what is actually keeping them there? It is fear, plain and simple. They are afraid to rock the boat and mess up their being able to make content for a living. Too bad for them, they are too blind to see that YouTube has already been rocking it for them and in a lot of cases wants content creators to capsize and fail. Look at everyone they've targeted financially over the last 3 years because of political and societal wrongthink after Hillary Clinton lost in 2016 for proof of this. Now the FTC, an agency that is rife with deep state, is conveniently in the picture with less than a year before the 2020 presidential election rocking the boat too. On each side, they have someone grabbing onto their boats and rocking the shit out of them, and they are worried about their doing it. They believe that if they just sit still, their table scraps and ad revenue won't fall over the sides and be lost to them. None of them see that their boats are taking on water and starting to sink faster and faster as more of it pours in over the sides thanks to YouTube and now the FTC. They need to realize this and start bailing their asses out and the boats they are in, or it is going to be game over for them. And the only way for them to do that is to transition themselves someplace out of the reach of both, which takes us back to BitChute. I think I have made it clear here what I believe COPPA will bring to YouTube and why it will. I also believe that I have made it clear that BitChute, as things stand, is the only alternative for content creators regarding both. It puts them out of the reach of unelected bureaucrats at the FTC using the Child Online Protection and Privacy Act to go after them for wrongthink, which will happen. Plus, it is the only platform that is capable of competing with YouTube. One that is built on free speech, besides a lot of open source technologies that make it able to do that. All it needs is for the content to be there, the creators of it to promote it, and the normies will come. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you liked this video, depending on where you are watching it, please give it an upvote or thumbs up. If you want to know when new content of mine hits the internet, don't forget to subscribe to one or more of my social media or video accounts listed here. Also, with YouTube, don't forget to ring that bell. You can find all of my video content on both BitChute and YouTube. This may not be the case with other places I upload to, but I will try to minimize this happening. You are always welcome to interact with me at any of these sites on the list, so feel free to do so. If you have anything you want me to cover in a video, when it comes to news or current events, send it right along to me. I will try to do my best to cover it. As always, thank you for watching.